So here's a big question. Is intelligence just one single thing that we can measure, or are there, lots of different ways to be smart? It's actually one of the biggest debates in psychology, and today we're going to break down the major theories that try to figure it all out.
We throw the word intelligence around all the time, but what does it really mean? Is it just about getting a high score on a test, or being able to solve super complex problems, or is it something else? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we've actually got to go way back.
Turns out the word itself has some pretty ancient roots. It actually traces all the way back to the Sanskrit term buddhi, which comes from the word bud, and its meaning is, I think, beautifully simple: to understand or to gain knowledge. So, at its absolute core, you could say intelligence is just about the process of understanding the world around us.
Okay, but that simple idea, it cracks open this huge debate. One that's been shaping psychology for more than 100 years. Is that ability to understand just one single thing, or is it more like a whole collection of different talents?
And that right there, that's the central conflict. On one side, you've got this idea of a single core general intelligence, kind of like one engine that powers everything we do mentally. And on the other side, the belief that there are multiple, totally independent intelligences. And believe me, the answer to this matters. It has huge implications for everything from how we design our schools to how companies hire for jobs.
All right, so let's dive into the one intelligence camp first. The main champion for this idea was a psychologist named Charles Spearman. Back in 1904, he came out with this, groundbreaking idea called the two-factor theory.
So, Spearman's idea was that our intelligence is basically made of two parts. First, there's the G factor, which stands for general intelligence. The best way to think about this is like your core mental horsepower, the energy you use for pretty much any mental task. Then, you have the S factors, or specific intelligences. These are the skills you learn and get good at through practice, like music, or math, or anything else. And this idea, that one single G factor is the key to our potential, well, that became the whole foundation for standardized tests.
And for decades, Spearman's theory was pretty much king. It was the dominant idea. But then, 1983 happens. A guy named Howard Gardner comes along and just completely flips the script. He basically argued that this whole idea of a single G factor was just way, way too narrow.
Gardner's theory just blows the doors off the old definition of smart. He came up with 8 different kinds of intelligence. His whole point was that we should be trying to find and nurture everyone's unique strengths. So, for example, there's spatial intelligence. That's what an engineer or a sculptor uses to see things in 3D in their head. Then you have interpersonal intelligence, which is that skill a great teacher or leader has to really understand and connect with other people. And there's also intrapersonal intelligence, that deep self-awareness a philosopher might have to understand their own thoughts and feelings.
Okay, so we've got the one versus many debate raging. But then another psychologist comes into the picture and asks a totally different question. He says, look, instead of just asking what intelligence is, what if we asked how it works?
And the person who took on that question was Robert Sternberg. He developed what's called the triarchic theory. And for him, intelligence isn't just something you have, like a possession. It's a process with 3 key parts all working together.
So his 3-part model looks like this. First, there's analytical intelligence. You can think of this as book smarts. It's all about processing information. Second, you've got creative intelligence, or innovative smarts. This is how you handle brand new problems you've never seen before. And third, there's practical intelligence, what we'd call street smarts. It's that crucial skill of just figuring things out and adapting to the world around you. And Sternberg's big point was that our schools are often obsessed with the book smarts, but they totally miss the creative and practical skills that are so important for success in the real world.
All right, all of this naturally leads us to a really famous and, pretty controversial topic. If we can define intelligence, can we actually measure it? Can we put a number on it? Well, that's the story of the IQ test.
This whole journey really kicked off with a guy named Alfred Binet. He's the one who created the very first test designed to measure intellectual ability. But the famous formula, the one that gives you an intelligence quotient, or IQ, that came from a psychologist named William Stern back in 1912.
And the formula itself was actually pretty simple. You take a person's mental age, which is what the test figures out, you divide that by their real, chronological age, and then you just multiply by 100. So for example, if a 10-year-old is performing at the same level as an average 12-year-old, their IQ would be 120. So what happened when psychologists started using this to measure IQ for huge groups of people? Well, a really clear pattern started to show up. It's a pattern we now call the bell curve, and it gives us a picture of the full spectrum of human intelligence. So When you look at this spectrum, where do you think most of us fall? Seriously, take a guess. Are most people geniuses or below average? Or are most of us somewhere smack dab in the middle?
Well, the data is just incredibly clear on this. A full 50%, half of the entire population, lands right in the middle in what's considered the average range, from an IQ of 90 to 109. And the further you get from that center, the more the numbers just drop off a cliff. Only about 4.4% of people fall into the real extremes at either end of the spectrum, which means, by definition, the vast majority of us are average.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that big question. After looking at a single G factor, a whole garden of different intelligences, and the numbers on an IQ test, what does it really mean to be intelligent? Is it one thing or is it many? Is it something we're just born with or something we can build? You know, maybe true intelligence isn't about finding one single answer. Maybe it's about our ability to just keep asking.
This is the brief on the psychology of intelligence. You know, intelligence derived from the Sanskrit word Buddha, meaning to understand or gain knowledge, is way more than just being book smart, and understanding its psychological frameworks totally changes how we view human potential. First, let's look at the foundation of intelligence. Back in 1904, Charles Spearman's two-factor theory split intelligence into a G factor, that general innate mental ability everyone has, and an S factor for specific learned skills like math. Think of your smartphone. The G factor is the built-in operating system you're born with, while the S factor represents those specific apps you download and train in. Second, the multifaceted brain. Psychology didn't stop at two factors, it literally exploded. Howard Gardner gave us 8 distinct intelligences, highlighting spatial intelligence for engineers and sculptors and interpersonal intelligence for leaders. Robert Sternberg's triarchic theory then split intelligence into analytical, creative, and practical street smarts. So ask yourself, if a sculptor perfectly visualizes and carves a complex 3D shape but bombs a written logic test, are they actually less intelligent or just using a different part of the garden? Finally, the math behind the IQ score. Alfred Binet started intelligence testing, but William Stern created the formula in 1912. Mental age divided by chronological age multiplied by 100. To put that into perspective, 50% of the population falls right in the average range between 90 and 109. But here's the irony. We just covered 8 distinct types of intelligence, yet society still tries cramming all human complexity into a single 112-year-old math equation. Ultimately, human intelligence isn't just a single test score, but a complex, fascinating blend of innate processing power, diverse specific talents, and practical street smarts.